Hello, true believers. Jesse D'Angelo here. Thank you for joining me again. And today I'm going to talk about editing tips. Right now I'm editing my novel, Pray to God, and I just finished the first draft and my editor sent me back his notes, and I'm reading through the notes and I'm writing the second draft, and I'm amazed at some mistakes I made. Kind of cringing at some of the things I wrote, and so this is a good time to talk about editing. So I'm going to give you 5 editing tips. But first, I want to give a shout out to my boy Iain Anderson, who just came out with this new book of his. I helped him just a little bit with the cover. It's not my artwork, but I just helped him format it a little bit so it could get printed, and it looks really cool. I'm looking forward to reading this soon. So go out, check out Watched. You can get it on Amazon. Check out Iain Anderson on Facebook and show some support. Alright, so now moving on. 5 editing tips. Now these are not necessarily my top 5 and they're not necessarily my only editing tips, but these are the 5 that I thought of today, and this is what you get for free. So here we go on my nice ghetto piece of paper that I wrote them down on. Let's see. Number 1, repeating words. Alright? This is something you want to look for when you're doing your second draft. You're going to do things like, you're going to notice that you wrote the, or and. You're going to look for little repeated words like that, but not just repeated, one right after another. You're going to look for repeated words in paragraphs. Do you use the word again 4 times in the same paragraph? Do you use the word gasped 5 times in one page? You want to look for those things and try to cut them down and find synonyms or find a way around that. Like here's my manuscript of my first draft, and I found a couple little places. So on this page, right, I've got water, 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 right? All on the same page. And I also have the other side and the other side. Right? So you'll notice you're going to repeat things like that. And you don't want that. That is not good writing. So find other ways to say the other side. Find other ways to say water. Is it liquid? Is it the current? Is it the ocean? Is it a lake? What kind of water is it? And do you even need to say water? You could cut out water and sometimes the sentence still has its same meaning. So look for those repeated words. Try to trim them down as much as possible. Use synonyms. Otherwise it starts getting stale. Let's move on, shall we? Number 2, cliches. Now, cliches can be like a big kind of story cliche, or they could just be a turn of a phrase, such as, and I did this a couple times in my book, and it made my editor cringe, and it made me cringe realizing that I had done it. A single tear ran down his cheek. That's a cliche, right? Razor sharp. How many times have you heard a knife be described as razor sharp? From the bottom of my heart, with all that I have. There's these phrases that you've heard a million times, and it's just part of the lexicon, and you just use them without even thinking about it. So when you're going through and you're editing, try to look for those things and come up with a different phrase that means the same thing. Or just cut it out altogether. You don't necessarily need it. Not that all cliches are bad, by the way. Sometimes cliches work, and that's why they're cliches. Numero 3. Specific passes. Okay, this is an interesting one. So you're doing your second draft. Don't try to correct everything. Don't try to make your second draft perfect. The last draft is the draft that needs to be perfect. Each draft, I like to look for a specific thing to work on, because trying to fix everything is just a monumental task. So one draft, you can maybe only focus on grammar and spelling and typos and things like that. Go through and try to look for all the compound adjectives. Look for all the places that you should have a comma, or places that you shouldn't have a comma, or places that you should use a semicolon. Do your grammar pass, or your grammar draft, right? Another pass you could take would be a structural draft, right? So does this chapter need to be moved? Does this chapter need to be cut out? Does this plot line work? Does this character arc work? You know, those are like the big overarching sort of things you want to work on. So don't necessarily do all the big overarching structural changes in the same draft as you're doing little grammatical changes. Break it up, make it a lot easier on yourself. Number 4, the use of parentheses. I do this a lot, and it helps me kind of write more quickly. And that is, if I'm trying to write something that's a specific technical detail, like a specific car, a specific gun, a specific kind of technology, or even a specific town, what street are they on, whatever it is, but I don't want to have to think of it, and I don't want to have to look it up on the computer. I'll just put in parentheses, he took out his, parentheses, specific gun, or he drove down specific street. And I know that when I go back and I do my drafts, when I see those parentheses and it says specific, okay, at some point in my editing process, I'm going to have to look this up and find the specific gun, the specific engine, the specific street. But when you're writing your first or second draft, you just want to be flying. You just want to be writing. You don't want to have to stop and Google something, right? So instead of doing that, just put in parentheses, specific whatever it is, and then you know for later that you can go back to that. All right. Number 5, use strong verbs. Don't use weak verbs. Strong verbs. Strong verbs good, right? What do I mean by this? Instead of saying he ran across the street, you could say he bolted across the street. Instead of saying he punched the man in the face, you could say he blasted his fist into the man's face. Instead of saying he got out of the car, you could say he jumped out of the car, or he leapt out of the car, or he hopped out of the car. Maybe he's tired and he, stumbled out of the car. Whatever it is, be specific and be dramatic. Right? You want to hook people. You want to punch them with the words. You want to use strong verbs, not weak verbs. Hefty, 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 not wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. Okay? That's 5 tips from Uncle Jesse. Are you going to use them? Tell me what you think. Do you have 5 tips of your own? Do you want to tell me that my 5 tips are full of shit? You want to tell me that I'm making a fool of myself? Guess what? I don't care! Thank you for joining me. Jesse D'Angelo here. See you next Sunday.